If we want to understand what Yom Kippur achieves, how it is possible to even make the suggestion, as Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi does in the Talmud, that the day of Yom Kippur in and of itself can atone, can cleanse us of the things that we have done wrong. So to understand that, we need to appreciate that there are three dimensions of our relationship with God. We all understand that we have a relationship with God. And we understand that that relationship is built into the fabric of our soul. But there are three levels of experience of that connection to God that we could have. The most obvious, most accessible, most common version of our relationship with Hashem is we do what Hashem wants. And that's similar to the relationship that we have with people. We build a connection, we create a bond between individuals when we honor the things that they care about, when we listen to their instructions, if they're, let's say, an employer or an authority figure in our lives, or we just simply are attentive. Like, for example, in a loving relationship where we know what the person really enjoys and therefore we facilitate those things. And that creates a beautiful connection between us and that person, a connection that is not self-interested, a connection that is outwardly focused. And that's where the truest relationships are built, when we actually think about what is important and valuable to somebody else. That's what deepens our relationship with that person. And so it is with Hashem. When we care about what Hashem cares about, and when we dedicate ourselves to doing what Hashem wants, that formulates a very meaningful connection between us and Hashem. Now, we do accept the possibility that we don't always live up to those expectations. Sometimes we let ourselves down, sometimes we let Hashem down, we don't do what we're supposed to, or we do things that we should never have done. And that's when we have to dig deeper through the process called Teshuvah to uncover a level of relationship between us and Hashem that exists in spite of our bad choices. In other words, there is a relationship between us and Hashem which is quite limited to behaviors. If we follow the correct behaviors, then that relationship is in place. And then there's a deeper connection between us and Hashem which has less limitation. It's not bound by our behaviors. In other words, even if we do things which we shouldn't have done, that relationship is so dynamic, is so powerful, is so deep that it survives that mistrust or those poor choices that we've made. And that's why Teshuvah is, in a sense, more powerful than the observance of a mitzvah and has the capacity to undo the damage that we may have done by either neglecting a mitzvah or transgressing something the Torah forbids. Therefore, Teshuvah represents a deeper relationship between us and God, but not the deepest relationship. And the reason for that is because it is still a relationship that has its bounds, it has its rules, it has its protocols. If you do Teshuvah, then we have a relationship. In human conduct, we call that a conditional relationship, conditional love. And we understand that conditional relationships are not the ideal. In fact, between us and our family members, between us and our children especially, we want to know that we have unconditional love. Which means that even if things have really gone pear-shaped, we still love our children anyway. That's how it should be. So the relationship between us and God that is dependent on the things that we do has severe limitations, because if we don't do those things, the relationship is in peril. And the relationship between us and God that goes beyond doing those things, which is the relationship represented by Teshuvah, while it is much more powerful than an ordinary relationship, still has its limits because you have to do the Teshuvah process, which requires a lot of investment and a lot of sincerity. And only if you do it properly and you have real remorse and you make a solid commitment for how you're going to behave in the future, then that relationship remains solid. The deepest degree of relationship between us and God is absolute. It's intrinsic. It's our spiritual DNA. So if you could imagine a family that has some, God forbid, some kind of a breakdown, and there's a family member who's estranged from the rest of the family, a child who's estranged from a parent, so the damage to the relationship is very deep. And it is even possible that it would be irreparable. They'll never get back together. They'll never see eye to eye again. They'll never live under the same roof. That is possible. And yet, if you were to do a DNA test of that child, they would still retain the genetic makeup of their parents, because that level of depth of connection is no longer a connection through relationship. That is a connection that is intrinsic to who I am. There is nothing in the world that I could do to change, alter, or get rid of my DNA. And that is the deepest level of relationship between us and Hashem. That it's not a matter of what we do or what we avoid doing. It's not even a matter of how we repair the kinks in our relationship or the dedication that we show after we've stepped out of line. It is in the very fiber of the essence of our soul. That is the deepest layer of connection to Hashem. That is what we access on Yom Kippur.